everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the co-founder and CEO with Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools. Over the last 13 years, we have worked with life science companies from across the globe, helped them with everything from creating virtual advisory boards, investigator meetings, medical education programs. And since the launch of our Insight Events platform, we've been helping companies with sales training, corporate events, hackathons, and everything in between. But more importantly at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations that we have with leading edge experts, thought leaders, provocateurs, we can all work to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. But it doesn't just stop there. We have to sustain these conversations. This is precisely the reason we have the Insight platform, so that we can work with people to continue the dialogue and to move agendas forward. So I'm really excited to have one of these digital provocateurs or entrepreneurs at the table with me today. This is Rishi Nayar. He's actually the co-founder and CEO of a company called PocketHealth. It's a rapidly growing digital health company that enables healthcare providers to instantly share imaging records with patients. He is passionate about changing how sensitive patient information is shared throughout our healthcare system, and he's solving some really complex business problems that come with this challenge. He's also a really strong believer that if you place patients at the center of the record release process, data really just moves more ethically, easily, and securely through the patient care journey. Prior to co-founding PocketHealth, in 2016, Rishi worked in the investment banking division of Citicorp, where he advised on a number of cross-border mergers and acquisitions, equity, and debt-raising transactions. Welcome, Rishi. So happy to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Natalie, for having me on and for the kind introduction. Really excited to be here today.
Absolutely. So very exciting background. Obviously, I'm a big fan. I just want to let everybody know I use PocketHealth. I was the one who sought after you because I really love the app. But I do want to ask you how you sort of landed. You were in finance, doing M&As and all kinds of great stuff. How did you end up becoming and starting a company, especially in healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, the story starts really more from the patient perspective and not the healthcare provider perspective. And that's been very valuable kind of leading up to now. I co-founded PocketHealth with my brother, actually. So I come from a business background. My brother came from an electrical engineering background. So he was a software engineer. He went over to the States to do his master's in the Bay Area and then moved over to a startup, which was then acquired at Google. But by Google. And during that time, he actually got a tennis injury. And his doctor asked him to go get an X-ray and an MRI. And at the end of the appointment, they handed him these 2 CD-ROMs, which was just so perplexing. You know, Netflix up the road, YouTube down the road. And he called me and said, Rishi, first, it's cool that I got access to this information, but the way I got it was so inaccessible. He doesn't even have a CD-ROM drive. His doctor only had one in the entire office. And we both felt the entrepreneurial urge, and we had felt that for years, but we felt that this was finally a problem that A, we could solve, and 2, that when solving it, it would make a really big impact to patients. You know, we were blessed that we came from backgrounds where we were able to take a taxi and pick up a CD. Most patients are not in that situation. And that's really the spark that started us building PocketHealth.
Love it. So did he come back to the Toronto area, or is he still helping you over in the Bay Area?
Yeah, it was a decision point that we had to make. Do I move over to the Bay Area, the so-called mecca of startup creation, or do we move back to Toronto? We knew that we wanted this to become an international solution very quickly. So it wasn't really about where we were selling, it's where is the best place to start a company. And for us, Toronto was ideal. We have a tremendous computer science talent coming from some of the best universities in the world here. And also we have some of the best hospitals in the entire world. So being in proximity to places that are doing cutting edge research, that are known for being on the up and up with digital health and always trying to push to improve the patient experience or the in-hospital efficiencies experience, ideally both. That was something that we made a calculated bet that would lead to a really fruitful environment when you're a very small company trying to do something very big. And looking back, being in Toronto and then moving into the States from a sales perspective and doing a really great job over there and becoming a top provider, that was the right move from the beginning.
So this started as an idea. So tell us, Rishi, a little bit, and this is an idea and this was actually even prior to COVID. So tell us how you took an idea from its infancy. Where did you shop it, and how did you build from there?
Yeah, so this is where healthcare startups actually don't differ, in my opinion, at all from traditional startup thinking, which is you always start with the user. You build a minimal viable product, an MVP, and you try to just push it out as early as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect. It does have to meet your basic expectations that it's secure, the data is encrypted, et cetera. But from a user experience, if it's perfect, you've waited too long. So we built a prototype. We ensured that it was being stored and encrypted properly. And then we just basically went to a lot of patients and said, theoretically, if your clinic had this, would you use it? And of course, a resounding yes. Compared to a CD-ROM, of course, we would use it. It barely has to work for us to prefer this to a CD-ROM. Then we went to the other side of the marketplace, you could say, is to these hospitals, to these imaging centers, and said, look, if we could build this for you and deploy it in a way that was extremely simple and it was just completely automated, would you use this instead of burning CDs? And again, it was just a resounding yes. But in terms of how you go about that, you just had to pick up the phone or knock on doors. I think that experience is critical in the early days. You can't use connections. We didn't have any to use, luckily, but it ensures that people have no bias, that when they're saying, yes, this is of value, I would deploy this, or when can I get it? I want it ASAP. You know that they're being genuine about the product because you aren't a friend of theirs or a family friend. And so they're giving you the honest truth, which is what you're trying to get to ASAP. Because we were committed that if this didn't work, we would find another way to solve this problem. So we were surprised when our first iteration was actually one that resonated so strongly with the market and made a really good springboard to the, I would say, quite sophisticated and frictionless version of the platform that we actually deploy today.
So you in the marketplace, Rishi, were solving a problem. And if you were to state the problem, if there was a problem statement, was it just the inefficiencies of how people were capturing their scans in general, the format of the scans, the fact that people were losing their scans? How would you define the problem statement?
I would say that the way in which medical imaging data was released to the patient was so inefficient that it was creating massive problems and cost on the hospital side, and massive problems and cost and anxiety on the patient side of it. And it led to worse outcomes. It led to having to re-radiate a patient, or having to have a helicopter wait on the tarmac to transfer a patient while that CD is being burned. So it led to all of these incredibly sad scenarios deriving from what at the end of the day is a file transfer problem. So it wasn't really how the data was captured. It's just there was so much friction of moving that from where it was captured to who needed to read it, that it was creating so many knock-on effects in the hospital and for the patients themselves. We were obviously driven and sparked from that patient experience. And then as we explored, we realized, wow, this is a massive problem on the hospital side, which needed to happen, because if it was not a massive problem on the hospital side, we probably couldn't be at the massive market impact that we've had now, because you have both stakeholders finally. And let's throw the physicians in as well, all stakeholders saying, yes, we want this solved ASAP.
Who was your early adopter, Rishi? Was there a specific institution, geography? Where did you sort of make your initial inroads?
So what a lot of folks don't necessarily realize, or it might not be that intuitive, is that half of imaging, sometimes more than half of imaging, depending on the jurisdiction, is not done in hospitals, but it's done in these freestanding imaging centers or imaging clinics. So those are sometimes easier to penetrate as a smaller company than a large hospital. So we actually started with these smaller centers. The complexity of imaging is typically comparable, and you have a situation where there can be folks that are quite innovation minded, folks that want to be competitive and they want to improve their patient experience because they see them every single day. The owner of the clinic might even be the one who's actually scanning the patient as a Jack or Jill of all trades. So we started there. The equivalent would be of a startup starting in the SMB market and then moving to mid-market and moving to enterprise, which is quite a common route instead of jumping into the enterprise market. It allows you to refine your product. It allows you to get in with a much smaller sales team. And it allows you to, by the time you get to the enterprise, you have an enterprise ready product. Something that's been battle tested, it can deal with the volumes. You have all the admin panels and all the auditability and capabilities that you need. And you build that up through the blood and sweat of working your way through a very demanding SMB and mid-market, which in this case would be the centers, imaging centers.
Did you give the original prototype free to people so that they could troubleshoot the prototype, put bullet holes through it? What was that initial offering look like, or did people pay for it?
They paid for it, and I can understand why you asked. It was tempting to just give it out and see what people thought, but we felt that when we're running the experiment, a critical unknown was this valuable enough for patients to pay for? And of course, now with nearly 500,000 patients on the platform, paid patients on the platform, we know it's a resounding yes. But at that time, that was quite an unknown. Even now, the model that we have that's created by patients, funded by patients, and with the data owned by patients, that's quite a unique model. It is a unique model with no one else in the industry at scale performing in that way. So we knew that people could love it, but if they're not paying for it, a lot of risk would remain from a business standpoint. So we felt that right off the bat, yes, it's going to lower user uptake, but we had to charge off the bat because we had to test, is this something real that's useful for patients? Or is it sort of a, why not? Sure, it's free.
From the enticement of the actual administrators, the clinics, the diagnosticians, those people, how did you incentivize them? Was there a business model or an economic model that you showcased? It's, this versus this, or was there a convenience piece? What was the business modeling that you helped to share with them to get them to be believers?
Yeah, luckily it was quite simple because CDs are a very easy business case. The removal of CDs is a very easy business case to make. So we always start on the patient experience side, that look, your patients are going to be so much happier. We have all the stats and data to back that up. And then what that means in terms of repeat volume and just higher patient satisfaction scores, which actually does lead to increase in reimbursements, especially on the Medicare, Medicaid side. So there's that piece. Think of that as top line revenue increase. But typically the most salient and easy business case to make is, look, we're the only provider that can get you to 100% zero CD. And we prove that time and time and time again at extremely large institutions. It's institutions that do 1 million exams a year. They don't burn a single CD. So we can prove out that reality uniquely. And then once we've proven that out, we can walk through a pretty natural business case of, well, what happens when you're at zero CD? Well, you can reallocate those FTE to other roles in the department. You can get rid of your CD burning, your FedEx fees, your CD burner hardware. There's literally robots, if you can imagine, that are burning these CDs inside the hospital. I can't believe that industry even exists in 2021, but it does. And then all the CD burning software, and then all the knock-on impacts on enterprise risk and everything along those lines, that you're not having inappropriate releases or any liability associated with that. So the business case is always, like any good business case, multifaceted from the patient experience standpoint, from the cost reduction standpoint, and then always the security risk standpoint.
So Rishi, you can get rid of those CD-ROM burner robots along with the fax machines that many physicians and hospitals still use. So hopefully we can all put those out to pasture at some point. So tell us a little bit about what the patient journey is like. Somebody shows up in a typical community, X-ray unit. They booked an appointment because we're now in COVID-19. Where do they go from there?
Yeah, we really lean heavily on a partnership with the hospitals to educate the patient. So a patient walks in, they get an MRI. At the end of the appointment, their technologist is probably saying, "Look, and if you want your imaging, you can go on Pocket Health and sign up." As they leave, if they ask for a CD, that image library staff member or that front desk staff member is going to say, "Hey, great question. We don't burn CDs anymore. Here's a handout. You can go online and enroll for your Pocket Health access." Same thing if they called into the hospital call center or went on the hospital website. So almost universally, patients find out about Pocket Health at the point of imaging exam, which is an amazing time for it to happen because it's not too late. It's literally just in time, and the need is greatest at that point. It's not like they got to their doctor's appointment and the doctor says, "Where's your CD?" The patient already knows about it. They can say, "I got you covered. My access is on Pocket Health and I've shared it with you already." So that's the patient journey. They sign up, then they get access to it, and it's stored. Their entire imaging history at that hospital is stored permanently in their account. And then if they ever want to share with any physician, they can go ahead and share it in full diagnostic quality. Often in the case of obstetrical exams, you have patients sharing with their family pictures of the upcoming baby. So it's really an easy to use platform targeted towards non-tech savvy patients, which most of our patients are not tech savvy, but have been left out of digital health as a result. So we try to bring everyone into the fold and keep things very simple, but fully functional, which is not the easiest line to cross, to tread, but I think we do a great job at that.
And I have to be honest, I'm not trying to say like I'm selling this for you, but having been a user of Pocket Health, I found the user experience extremely easy. I am a bit of a digital geek, so I completely embraced it, but I really liked how it walked through the steps. And then when I went to speak to somebody about my scan or whatever it is that I did, it was really easy for me to either hand them something so they could actually QR code it or enter the data or the link. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful, simple experience. With all of that said, the person or the people or the institution or the clinic that took the scan, tell us a little bit about the dashboard that they use and what are they harboring in terms of records, and how is this different from the times when they were just using libraries of CDs?
Yeah, so luckily we try to make it as automated as possible. When a patient accesses, in the vast majority of scenarios, the patient accesses, and then all of the demographic information is validated automatically. They get access, and then it's more about the hospital's view is more about the auditability and traceability, that you can go in and see which specific exams were shared by which patient. When the hospital goes in and shares with other hospitals directly through Pocket Health, which is functionality they've been able to do now for years, they can also revoke transfers, see if a transfer was actually viewed, see which specific exams were viewed. So it's all about giving that visibility. But at the end of the day, we try to make it as automated as possible, because if before you were clicking a button to burn a CD, we ideally don't want to make it that now you're clicking a button to give digital access. Ideally, you're just not clicking that button at all. But anytime you want, you can go in and see what access is released and have confidence that if it was released, that means the signed patient consent was received, that all the patient demographic information, including a unique identifier, was matched and validated against the internal system, the PACS, and you have that safety. So that's our approach to the role that the hospital plays. It can be as deep as they want, but ideally it's fully automated and it's on the patient, and the patient wants that responsibility anyways.
So what you're basically saying is that you have given patient consent for anybody that technically receives those scans. Is that what we're saying here?
Any patient that got a scan done at a Pocket Health hospital has the legal right, and they've always had that legal right to go in and say, "Look, those are my records of my body, and I want access to them." And through Pocket Health, they're getting it in a way that's audited and logged, that there's no confusion about that this is their scan, that it's actually theirs, and that they are who they say they are. So, and we can do that through a lot of let's say complex security mechanisms, including analyzing the actual scan itself and making sure that that matches with information that the patient's told us. We also do that in a way, and Ali, you yourself were a user, we do that in a way that is quite seamless from the patient's perspective. So it's all happening in the background. So the patient does not have to be a techie to go through this process, but we're not sacrificing anything in terms of the security piece.
So on that note, Rishi, have you built in deep algorithms and other sort of computer deep analytics that does that assessment to look at actual variability, to verify, if you will, the identification? How does that work on your platform?
Yeah, the good thing is that imaging data is actually logged quite tightly, and most importantly, in a very standardized way. And that's, so we stand on the shoulders of giants that did a lot of important work decades ago on ensuring that there are standards and protocol in the DICOM standard, which is the traditional file format. So we're able to go in and actually match first name and reliably look at first name. Match, for example, if you're Ontario, you use a health card, OHIP, and match that precisely. So we're able to actually go in and do those deep analytics and compare it against the source of truth, which is what is on file at the hospital itself. So exactly what someone in real life would be doing, which is comparing first name, last name, date of birth, OHIP, except now we're putting in that extra layer of, we can ask questions to the patient of this is a multi-site hospital. Which site was your imaging done at? A very easy question for the patient to answer, but it adds a significant degree of complexity. We can also do things like masking, ensuring that you can't submit multiple requests in a certain period of time, ensuring the sign consent, ensuring that it's a valid credit card behind the request, so you have some logging behind that. And obviously, there's a lot of security behind the scenes that we don't necessarily publish, but of course we work in tandem with our hospital partners on that. So security is always an ongoing effort inside any company, not just a healthcare company that safeguards sensitive information or is trusted to store that information. And we're really proud of the balance we've struck between user experience and not sacrificing anything in terms of is this the right record for the right patient at the right time.
So on that note, I mean, not that anything is ever perfect, but we always talk about AI bias and, some of the built-in issues with that. There's times and places when bias takes place, but with these kinds of things where there's really standardized process and numbers and issues, there seems to be little room for error. Has there been an evaluation of your methodology in the use of your AI, your platform, versus human error, of potentially connecting the wrong scan to the wrong patient? And has that study been done?
Yeah, we've done it. We've done it anecdotally across all of our sites. So we've never had an incident of inappropriate release. Meanwhile, inappropriate release is unfortunately not unheard of in a hospital. In fact, it's quite unusual for a hospital of even medium size to go a year without an inappropriate release. It happens just due to the volume of release requests and that there is a human involved there. So we know that we significantly decrease liability when we come into a scenario, and that's just because there's just resilience behind it. That it's when you're matching first name, last name, unique identifier every single time, as opposed to 99.99% of times, that 0.01% can add up when you're multiplying it by a large number of release requests. So we're very proud of that track record, and we're also proud to help move those, when we talk about human error, move the humans over to doing value-added tasks that they do best, which is talking to the patient, checking them in, ensuring they know where their appointment is, ensuring that they're prepped properly, that they drank their water, for example, if it's an ultrasound, that they're taking their barium swallows, that they're moving them through the department fast enough, that they're doing the follow-up calls to let them know, hey, don't forget, you have an appointment today. There's so much for them to do. Anyone in the radiology department would say, yes, there's no shortage of work. And like checking demographic information is not one of those things where someone is required to do that manually.
Absolutely. And as I say, Rishi, AI is used for dull, dirty, or dangerous. And so if we can replace those things with robotics and give people the empathetic work, the work that's really counts, which is really the patient-centric type of work, we're all going to be in a better place. And getting people away from their computers and leaving machines to do that. So let's actually talk a little bit about interoperability. I know we talked a lot about Ontario. You're wanting to make this more national and eventually international. How is this going to be integrated into the the referral or the specialist's computers, their electronic health records? And how is that going to be made possible using your platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think one clarification I'll add is that we've been an international company for years. The majority of our growth now is inside the United States. So we spent our early years kind of growing the product in our home market, Canada, and then now we've successfully launched. And our like I mentioned, the majority of our growth comes from the U.S. market, and we're eager to add new markets in the coming years. So the question of interoperability, it does vary by jurisdiction. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like you're running two races at the same time. So one is that, yes, you want to ensure that as pipelines are being laid down, whether that's a new single sign-on system by a particular state or province, or some new EMR that is very popular, you want to be able to integrate with its patient portal, for example, and create these structural embeds into the ecosystem. And again, this is very jurisdiction by jurisdiction based on statewide initiatives, what vendors are popular and in use. And then the other parallel race is sort of the more pressing one, which is, are you building a system that does not require interoperability for it to work? That is it a system that has very few requirements? Ideally, just do you have an internet connection and a browser? Has very few requirements for it to just work and get the job done. We find that you need to be building a system that does both, thinking about long-term and short-term. One of the paralyzing things about healthcare is that there's been, rightfully so, a lot of focus on the interoperability piece, but it creates a situation where the system is of limited value to the vast majority of consumers. If it only works under when conditions X, Y, Z are met, it might be incredible and just beautiful and just pop up on your screen when those conditions are met. But if that's only met for about 1% of users, it's not really that relevant from just making an impact and solving this problem perspective. So that's how we think about it, both in Canada and the US, about our business and ensuring that we're thinking long term, connecting to those pipes, but making it that any patient, as long as you have a phone, or any doctor, as long as you have a phone or a computer or someone out there who can get you onto their computer, that you'll be able to view the imaging, share the imaging in full diagnostic quality.
Beautiful, love it. COVID-19 changed the world, good and the bad and the ugly. I mean, we've seen everything in between. What was the business like before COVID and what was it like afterwards? And I'm just curious specifically on the issue around barriers to entry or people wanting to change. Tell us what that looks like for PocketHealth.
Yeah, so before COVID, we were growing extremely quickly. We were getting a lot of uptake. After COVID, it was, I want to say more of the same, but that seems like an incredible understatement. It's like every hospital in North America woke up and realized, wow, I can't burn CDs anymore. And the digital solutions that I have been using, if any, are not solving the problem for us. They're not patient friendly. They're extremely high friction. So I'm having patients come in, I'm giving them PPE, I'm putting my own staff at risk to pick up a CD-ROM, and it's 2021, or excuse me, 2020 at that point in time. So so basically our ability to open up conversations with large health systems, get massive deployments very quickly off the ground was just completely changed. And we didn't have to fight as much about this is an urgent thing that will make such an impact to patients now. We didn't have to make that argument anymore because unfortunately COVID had made that argument for us. Now with COVID in the most of the US in our rear view, in Canada getting close to our rear view, we find that attitude has persisted, that it's not back to the way things used to be. It's, look, we need to just change how things are. We still really don't want patients coming in for something like picking up a CD-ROM in 2021, definitely not in 2022. So how can we solve that problem? So it's been a massive, massive tailwind for us, as it has been for many digital health businesses, but particularly businesses like ours that are in the space of virtual care or virtual sharing of data. So it's been a silver lining on what was otherwise not a great experience for anyone, both personally and professionally, having to live through COVID.
We've seen a lot of emergence of medicine, telehealth, and entire organizations, WellDoc, a series of other entire companies that have gone public. They're completely focused on the digital medicine, digital health space. Is Pocket Health developing partnerships with these sorts of companies to make them full outfitted healthcare, platforms themselves? What does that look like?
Yeah, right now we're trying to stay focused and just go to where the imaging is done and implement there. We find that basically building out that part of our market is by far the most important piece. That's where we can reach consumers and let them know that, look, there is an option besides getting a CD-ROM. So we try, as a team, we're the largest team dedicated to solving this problem in North America. But even with that said, you need to be able to focus, and we're focused on finding the places where the most complex imaging is done, imaging that is sent across the country, these massive referral centers, and then just be able to implement there and reach their patients in a time of need. We definitely do see opportunity to pair with the folks that are receiving the images. Some of these digital health companies, virtual care companies, a lot of folks get value to this from this, even especially on the payer side as well. I mean, the United States will be pursuing a strategy there. But right now, when we wake up, what do we think? We think, how do we reach more patients and solve this problem for more patients? And typically the answer to that is go to where they're getting their imaging done.
Love it, Rishi. And one of the core things about being a successful entrepreneur is to stay super uber focused. It's so easy to get easily distracted. So brilliant on your part. Talking about partnerships, or really the idea around patient centricity, which is really, I think, what your company is focused on. There's a lot of people potentially interested in the kinds of, outputs, if you will, the scans for things like clinical trials. We have heard a lot about decentralized trials very much for the fact it's COVID-19 and people being able to do things at home or otherwise. How is Pocket Health potentially partnering or working with pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, other healthcare companies to sort of solve their issues and maybe potentially creating these scans as part of a anonymized data lake?
Yeah, so the simple answer is we're not. Our belief is that this data belongs to the patient. We do see opportunities in the future to enable patients to on an opt-in basis share their information with a clinical trial or with a physician, but that always has to be the patient's choice, and they need to explicitly opt in. At the end of the day, even on an anonymized basis, it was sourced from patient data, so we're not comfortable having any third-party involvement, even for virtuous causes like advancing science, which I know the vast majority of our patients would be extremely supportive of. So with that said, we do want patients to be able to use their own data to improve their own lives, and that's really how we think about things. But that's more of an ideal versus in reality right now, we're focused on just reaching more patients and solving this problem. So I'd still say we're in the first inning. Obviously, it's very exciting, the idea of not just getting information about yourself, but then having that information tell you about yourself, or being able to use it in a creative way that you understand and explicitly consent to and are excited about. But right now, we're just focused on how do we get more patients their data in the first place, which is like such a pain point, that the vast majority of the United States is still getting a CD-ROM. And we know we can fix that.
When we talk about creating trust, one of the things we hear a lot about lately is how do we build that? How do we value that? A lot of work around cryptocurrencies on that note, but ultimately all based on the blockchain. How do we create and build that trust, through autonomous distributed organizations, or through these smart contracts, chain links, Oracle networks? How do we get this kind of information so patients can be in charge and potentially monetize their own health data?
To be honest, it's not a problem that we're too focused on, and not to dodge the question. It's just we haven't given it much thought, because patients are, if you're at that point, the problems that are hounding healthcare right now are solved so long ago that ideas around how do you monetize your data, how do you get insights from it, things like that, basically are built on the premise that you got access to it in the first place. And that is like so far from reality currently that yes, you can build towards that future, but and not to go back too much to my previous answer. At the end of the day, we're just focused on like the 98% of patients that are still getting CDs, because that makes such an impact to their lives right now. What we do in terms of enabling patients to do things with their records is we let them download it off the platform in full diagnostic quality, share it with anyone. So we make it that are, you say, super users that do want to do more with their data, because they're past the stage of just getting the information, but now they want to do something with it. They can do that easily through PocketHealth, but they'll just take more ownership of that process, and we're happy about that. But in the meantime, we're going to take our development resources, our business development resources, and focus on, okay, how do we fill all the gaps in healthcare in terms of image release, and make sure that every patient is getting ready access to their data as soon as they need it, and their doctors are as well. And then we're in a really great spot where we can think about, okay, how do we help patients do more? Do they want to monetize their own data? Is that something that we would support? Is it something that we would be involved in or just enable? These are questions that, to be honest, are not really top of mind at PocketHealth, because we're working on just how do we get the data to these patients in the first place. That clarity also helps us move a lot faster and solve a much more specific problem.
We've heard a lot recently, especially in the oncology space, where there's a lot of biomarkers and digital markers for a myriad of different things. We've heard about liquid biopsies, obviously COVID-19, 23andMe, other things where you're using nasal swabs and other things are kind of becoming the norm. So getting away necessarily from the traditional scanning X-ray facilities, we're starting to talk a lot more about Bluetooth-enabled types of devices. Do you see the day where PocketHealth may start exploring some of these options with the institutions and the clinics that you work with? So you may not necessarily have to come out of the clinic for the scan, but there's other sorts of tools that you enable, those get put onto your platform and executed in sort of a similar release pattern, or is that way too far in the future?
No, I think that it's something that we're trying to build towards. We've always believed, we didn't name our company Pocket Image. We named it PocketHealth. We believe that we want patients to be able to access the entirety of their health record, and that includes not just official health records, but things that are off the record, if you want to say, which is like your step data, your heart rate, and then we get into some very cool things like genomic data, the things that enable precision medicine at a scale that's just never been possible before. So decisions like that are actually talked about currently, because we have to think about what technology are we building our platform on top of. Is it technology that enables sharing of not just images, but also other types of health data, which is definitely going to be part of the future of PocketHealth once we're ready to expand to that point. We know for a fact with the hundreds of thousands of users that patients want more than just images, because while imaging is extremely critical, it's the hardest type of health data to get your hands on, and it's the spark to most health journeys. So 3 really important things and 3 reasons why we started with imaging. While all that is true, there's more that patients need access to complete their healthcare journey and make an informed decision with their physicians about their care. So we obviously want to be playing that role. We're in a place where patients trust us. They like how they interact with their imaging information, and they want to interact with their other data in the same way. And we're just trying to make sure we do it in the same thoughtful way that made us so successful in the imaging space.
Beautiful. And I can actually vouch for it. It was an extremely easy and great experience with the scanning. When you talk about data, let's just be really frank. There's the lab data, right? Blood samples, urine samples, all those sorts of things. We also talk about the complete health record of a patient, including other sorts of scans, details, note-taking, all that other thing. Where is PocketHealth on that longer term play and inclusion of the full patient health perspective?
Yeah, I would put that in the same category as some of the more fancy things, like we talked about genomic data, in that it's important. Patients want access to it. It's critical to creating a wholesome care plan with your physician, and we know that we have the capabilities to do it. So and those decisions come into how we build our platform and future proof it. And I think what remains is that we're very interested in it, and we'll be exploring what is the right way to sort of slowly add those things to the platform, and help our patients kind of and sort of just realize the demand that's coming from our patients, but do it in a way that doesn't hurt our velocity on the imaging side, which we know is a massive problem, and we're getting so much exciting traction with.
Yeah, lots of legs and lots of ways to go about this. Um, we hear a lot, and at least in Canada, US is in a different place, but around patient portals and the accessibility and the whole regulatory legal discourse on what we can and can't have access to. What are some of the barriers, and again, this could be jurisdiction focused or based. What are we kind of running into about why we're not making these amply available for patients, if we were quote unquote calling this a patient portal?
Yeah, I think that for a lot of hospitals, it's cost. Patient portals are very expensive. I don't put Pocket Health necessarily in the patient portal category, but we integrate with most patient portals, certainly with all of the popular patient portals in Canada and the United States, and embed our functionality directly inside there. But for a lot of large hospital systems, it's cost, and it's also a belief that not all of these portals are that accessible. They're not the easiest to sign up for necessarily, and it takes a very concerted marketing effort inside the hospital to encourage a lot of enrollments. I've seen it done extremely well, where something like 75% of the patient population will sign up for our portal, which is incredible. But that involves coordination right down from the CEO's office all the way down to the front desk staff, who's saying, "Hey, Natalie, thanks for visiting us. Can I get your email? Then you'll get your results that way. And you can sign up for the portal." So that is, it requires attention in a hospital atmosphere that is with millions of competing priorities. So it's a little overwhelming for a hospital to embark on that, which is already costly from the vendor perspective. So I think that's part of the reason, but things are moving in the right direction, where we finally got to the point where if your hospital doesn't have a portal, you're a bit surprised. You might not like the portal, or it might not be that easy, but you generally expect it to have one, especially if it's a medium-sized or larger hospital system. So I think if we can just keep going in that direction, if some of the patient portal vendors can work on making the patient sign-up process easier, and work more closely with the hospitals on how to market it or build a patient engagement strategy, we'll really see a dramatic increase in adoption.
Is there a case for the government, and I'm thinking about public payers and potentially private payers, so insurance companies, is there some sort of a cost benefit analysis for them about jumping in and helping to pay for these? We already know that we got into electronic health records, so there's obviously that, but creating the reason to believe on the patient portal aspect of things to make this universal, and if so, what would be that case?
Yeah, I think that if you can ensure that it'll be used, the case is just use of services. When you have access to your imaging, you don't have another CT ordered of you at a cost of $2,500 or $5,000 to the payer. So that math can work extremely quickly. I think it's just difficult for some of these payers to, one, implement it or encourage it, and two, it's difficult to get any sort of confidence in terms of enrollment rates, because enrollment rates have not been amazing in the past. So folks have been burned a little bit in terms of, you launch a patient portal, maybe a couple % of patients enroll, even though it's free and there was a big effort behind it. So I think the world has changed in that respect, but I think a lot of payers are still a little bit gun shy to sort of put money behind it. But the business case is pretty clear in that if you can increase data sharing, logically you have fewer repeat procedures ordered, whether that's imaging or non-imaging, and that's where the payer can see the benefit. My gut is that the cost of the portal, the hurdle rate in terms of how many procedures to avoid is not going to be that many across the user base. Again, you can think of maybe a patient portal costs $2 or $3 a patient, and just think about one CT that's avoided could be $5,000. So the hurdle rate is not that bad. I think it's still amongst many competing priorities by the payer. I think it's we don't see a ton of this happening, though I bet you over the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot more of it as payers try to get creative about how they can reduce utilization across their base.
We have a lot of pharmaceutical, biotech, life science companies that follow our show. If somebody wanted to partner with you, what would that partnership look like?
I would say reach out and let's chat. Like I mentioned, we're very focused on being at the source of exam and focusing on that in terms of what else patients can do on the platform. That's something that we're not focusing on right now. And in terms of where the data goes, that's something that we've always said, and this will always be the case, is that the patient will be the one in control of it. So there's not an obvious partnership, but we're always happy to chat, especially because some of these companies have lines of communication to their patient groups that we don't necessarily have. Again, we think the most powerful line of communication is being at the point of exam, but there are other avenues that we would be interested in exploring. Is there a way to educate the patient in a different way?
100% for sure. So what is your predictions for the future of digital health in general? We talked a lot about different combinations and computations, but what do you see, especially around patient centricity practices?
Yeah, I think the power is moving to the patient. That's undoubtable. You see facts to that supporting that, and we've seen it for the last decade. The implication of that is that patients are going to be more educated and in charge of their care journey. So that can mean from choosing care providers or being discerning about care providers. It can mean understanding their information and working collaboratively with their physician on decision making, as opposed to just being along for the ride. And then you'll see an entire crop of digital health solutions around that. I also think eventually we're going to see this data access problem disappear. It is companies like PocketHealth that will make that a reality. But at the end of the day, data will be liberated. Just like in finance, if I want to find my credit card statement, I can find that. 20 years ago, it was not as easy. We will get to the point where it will not be a competitive advantage to give access to data, because patients will have access to data due to the hard work of many folks. And then the next step will be, okay, well, what do you do with it? How do you use it to forward the patient's care, lower their anxiety, help them understand what's going on? So I think all of that stems from the first statement I made, which is power is moving to the patient. That is a tailwind that is not going to reverse, especially as our aging population becomes increasingly tech savvy, and that's not going to stop.
We've been faced with a lot of cybersecurity issues recently, some as large as the Colonial pipeline issue to many other sort of major hacks that have been going on and continue. We are knowing that ransomware, is becoming actually a $1 trillion industry. So concerns around security, encryption, is this actually changing the discourse on what security or privacy means? Do we reevaluate what actually is private? And should we consider, as a provocative question, if we were to do a thought experiment in that all information was available for everybody to see all the time on the blockchain, what would the world look like? So I'm just curious about where we are today on the issue of cybersecurity and what could this look like in the future?
Yeah, I think that we definitely need to ensure that we're working towards a world where privacy still exists. So there is a school of thought that, look, let's just assume that everything will be public at some point. I think that's a world that, while exciting in some respects, is very scary for those most disadvantaged in society. for those where you have disabilities and may be discriminated from that perspective, where you come from a socioeconomic background where you feel that that'll be made aware and you'll be discriminated from that perspective. And we can talk about that ad nauseum. I think that at the end of the day, it'll lead to a little bit counterintuitively a more unequal world. So there's that piece, and then we absolutely cannot build towards a world where that's going to happen, because companies that care about security have built it into their DNA from day one. If you're a CIO somewhere and you're like now starting to think about security, that's a pretty scary place to be. This has always been a threat, and you need to be embedding it into your systems, and also understand that it is a continuous process. You can't just do a review at some point, build your app at some point, and then push it. You need to have regular internal reviews. You need to have regular external reviews, and you need to actually follow the recommendations, and then have people internally think about security from every push of new code onto the platform, and right down to the social engineering front, which many argue is actually the biggest risk. So you should be thinking about that, definitely. And then you can build towards a world where your data stays private. And definitely, I think a world where everything's on the blockchain theoretically is not one that I would be excited to live in. I think that it would lead to a lot of issues regarding inequality.
Yeah, a lot of really interesting dystopic, views on that. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would have countering views. So we're in a world with multiple, I guess, of the multiverse of many different variations of the truth. So tell us a little bit about what's next for you and PocketHealth. And on that note, if you had the choice of flying to space with Jeff Bezos, would you do that?
That last question is the easiest to answer. No, I'm a chicken. I don't like roller coasters. So I'm not. I like Earth and being safe on the ground, planted in my office chair. In terms of what's next, we feel that people have been trying to crack this problem of image data exchange for a very, very long time. We finally figured it out. We figured it out years ago. We're now expanding extremely quickly. We are the largest team in North America that's working on just solving this one problem. And we've been able to do it successfully at some of the largest hospitals in the world. So we have figured out what to do, and we're scaling rapidly. The next couple of years are just that. It's like, how do we get more patients in a world where they get imaging access seamlessly? Once we're past that point, then we'll start thinking about, okay, well, how can we start doing more with the information that benefit the patients on the platform and help them understand what's happening in their bodies and what should they do next.
Beautiful. Love the work that you, Rishi, and PocketHealth are doing to positively disrupt healthcare. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful experience. We would encourage anybody who's listening or watching the show, please reach out to Rishi if you're interested in inquiring further how to incorporate this into your organization, how you might be able to partner. We will be leaving his contact details, so please look for those in the show notes. If you enjoyed this show, we also encourage you to check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of conversations that we have with payers, patients, allied healthcare providers, physicians. If you're moving things forward, you're trying to create new protocols, policies within your organization or not, how are you going to institute this new way of doing scanning as an example? Or if you're looking at, adding this as part of your clinical trials, we would love to work with you with our white glove service. So thank you for everybody for attending the show today. We really appreciate it. We also really appreciate your time, Rishi. This was an outstanding conversation, and wishing everybody a wonderful day ahead.